Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I am speaking to Stephanie Martin and Claire Mooney from Be Parent Surrogacy Agency, and we're going to be talking about ways that an agency can support your gestational carrier throughout pregnancy, what that looks like from the help of a fabulous agency such as Be Parent. And we have some great questions to answer, talking about key dates, milestones, preparations, boundaries, which is super important. So, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Eloise. You seem to be on the slide. There we go.
There we go. Centered and balanced.
Please, could you start by introducing yourselves and Be Parent?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Martin, and I'm a branch manager for Be Parent. We're a surrogacy and family options provider with branches in both Georgia and Cyprus. And I'll let Claire introduce herself.
My name is Claire. I am a parental assistant, shall we say. I'm a nurse, and I help parents to prepare for the arrival and the care of their baby. So it's a unique little section that we have to make sure that parents feel fully supported as they deserve to feel.
Absolutely, and also a gestational carrier as well.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, fantastic. So first of all, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about Be Parent, for those who might be considering surrogacy as a route to parenthood, how that process may start, what people may want to consider. If you could tell us a little bit more about how you work.
Sure. Be Parent was established in 2017. So since then, we've been growing and growing. And we accept intended parents from all over, from many different countries around the world and of all statuses. So the aim to have various different branches was just to make sure that our philosophy was supported, that everybody deserves a family at the end. So regardless of your marital status or your residency or which passports you hold, that we would have an option to be able to help everyone.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
And in terms of the process, I mean, it's quite an involved process in terms of explaining, what we offer and reaching out to intended parents. There's many different ways, and always there'll be an interview at the beginning, and this kind of goes both sides, whether it's gestational carriers reaching out because they're interested in our program, or intended parents looking for options and wanting more information. So it kind of begins with an interview process from both sides. So you've got intended parents getting to know us getting to know them, a series of questions really. The main aspects would be obviously at the very beginning, there's expectations. So what intended parents are looking for, what gestational carriers are looking for, what their priorities are, and then of course the legal picture as well.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you for explaining a bit more. And how do you at Be Parent, how do you support gestational carriers from the beginning, throughout the process, during pregnancy and after birth?
Okay, well, we'll walk you through the various different stages. So I'll start with the pre-pregnancy picture, and this is quite important because this step you just want to make sure is very secure because it offers a lot of protection for gestational carriers. And it really is taking into account emotional history, physical history, and just ensuring that gestational carriers really have all the tools necessary to see a surrogacy arrangement through. So successfully from the beginning right until the completion. And part of that obviously involves eligibility requirements. And these, are, I think, fairly standard from surrogacy provider to surrogacy provider, but they need to be, firmly established and well communicated before there's any sort of contact or interviews or getting to know anyone. And these are pretty standard, including, ensuring that a surrogate carrier has a family of her own, so at least one child, that she's got a record of successful pregnancy in the past. This has to be supported by medical records, obviously. A good, healthy, young age bracket. Body mass index is important. Definitely the support of her immediate family. Financial stability being one, not struggling to be able to lead a stable, responsible lifestyle, and obviously avoidance and no use of narcotics, smoking, alcohol, this kind of thing. And the reasons that these are important is that it might not be obvious to everyone just how important each and every aspect is in order to successfully start and then see a surrogacy journey through. So it's really for gestational carriers protection that we have that in place right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we move on to triple screening measures. And this is something I think that Be Parent does particularly well. We've got home study interviews at the very beginning. And this is really important because we sort of cover through these interviews all the challenges, the pitfalls, the responsibilities that a surrogate carrier will need to take on to be able to successfully see her journey through. With that as well comes family support. So making sure that her immediate family's on board, because everybody has a personal approach in terms of who they're going to let in and share their journey with, but the immediate family is really important. They're a supportive tool for every carrier, so that's extremely important. We've got the legal channels that we see through. This is for her protection as well, to provide support that way so that she's sure that legally she understands exactly what's happening. These are legal briefings done in her language, depending on where surrogacy is taking place. And also that she understands all the documents she's going to be signing, both pre-birth, during pregnancy, after birth. Marital status clearance to ensure that she's single. This can have real repercussions for her later on after birth if she doesn't have single status. Not for everyone, but for a lot of embassies, this is an important component. So just making sure that that's been checked and that she's aware.
Why is that of importance out of interest?
Certain countries, certain embassies will afford parentage rights to a partner, let's say, so it won't be as simple as relinquishing parental rights to intended parents. In some cases, in Georgia, that's not applicable, but in our Cyprus branch, it would be. So it really just depends on the agency. I mean, sorry, not the agency, the country at play for the intended parents. And then moving from there, a very important part would be the medical checkpoints. Obviously, that sort of goes without question. And this would be the physical reproductive health assessments, obviously the viral sexually transmitted diseases, hormonal levels, endometrial health. And this is for her to know that if she's embarking on this huge journey, she's going through all this, time, effort, the emotions involved, and she's sacrificing her family time as well for a surrogacy journey, that it's not going to be in vain and that she does have a really good chance of success. So that's important for her to have done. And lastly, it's so important for every surrogate carrier to have IVF training. So not simply to, go online and sort of get up to speed as to what's happening, but to be properly trained in the methods and the procedures so she has a great understanding starting out. And not just what's the processes that are going to take place, but the medication, the effects on the body and the temperament, how that might play out in her own family. So these are all really important screenings that take place so that she's just adequately knowledgeable and prepared from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in terms of key milestones and dates for both the intended parent or parents and the gestational carrier, what should be at Be Parent? How do you support? Where are the key milestones?
You know what? Well, let me just quickly, before we move to that, just to cover a little bit of how we provide support during pregnancy and after birth. I'll let Claire maybe discuss a little bit about that, and then we'll get to the key dates and the milestones.
Yep.
Okay, so we provide full healthcare insurance. So our gestational carriers, they know that they're completely cared for and looked after. I think this is very reassuring for parents as well. It's very important that we get it right with the carrier because she means a lot to the parents. So we have that natural push always. Mm-hmm. How is she? Is she being looked after? Is she happy? Is she well? So it's driving us to make sure that we can reply absolutely yes she is and update them as well. We always make sure that they have support to appointments. We make sure that they're cared for in regards to logistics, traveling from here and there. We make sure that things fit their schedule. So they have notice, that they have lives to live as well. We really, really advocate for peer-to-peer support. And that means connecting gestational carriers with other gestational carriers so they can talk on a relatable level about what they're going through. As Stephanie mentioned, they're prepared for the IVF process. In the same way they're prepared for the IVF process, they're prepared for pregnancy. So before checks come and so on, they know in advance, oh, at X weeks, I have to go and do this. This includes this, this, and this. I might feel this, this, and this. So they have that care with them the whole time. We have a team of nurses that are dedicated to the carriers. They act as doulas as well. They provide the physical and the psychological sort of mental parameters for the carrier to feel entirely supported.
Because there are things, aren't there, such as obviously the way that people might be living, what they're eating, how they're sleeping, how much they're working, decisions, and 9 months or almost 10 is a long time to be sort of not under someone's watch, but, you know, involved in capacity. So how do you help support that period of time with both the intended parents who obviously I'm sure would want to know a lot about what's happening in the surrogate's life, but also with the surrogate being able to, or the gestational carrier being able to still live as they want to live?
Of course. Well, it ties a little bit into the sort of, you know, keeping everybody updated with milestones and the key dates, and as well, just in terms of how to protect the boundaries for our surrogate carriers. So to kind of tie those two together, staying connected is really important. Obviously, every intended parent, every surrogate carrier will have their own definition of what that means to them and how they can sort of smoothly bring that into their own life, you know, in terms of their schedule, their home routine, maybe, you know, their employment schedule, whatever it might be. But staying connected is super important. And one of the ways of doing that is having a really attentive and responsive support team. And I mean through the agency. So having personal coordinators on both sides, responsive people that can check in with intended parents and check in with surrogate carriers. And the reason I've sort of placed that in the middle, that piece, is because that kind of leads into mediated communication, which is what we support at Be Parent. And that ties into just one of the ways we protect the boundaries between, you know, specifically for surrogate carriers, but also the other way as well for intended parents. And part of the communication aspect and the connectivity that we foster includes record sharing and just how important that is. I mean, certainly for surrogate carriers, but they have more immediate access, obviously. For intended parents, this is crucial. So being able to provide videos, being able to provide scanned photos, being able to provide medical reports. These are all very important chronicle documents that parents will need for record keeping and just to feel safe and secure as well. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of keeping everyone connected and on track and updated with milestones and what's happening, we've got, I mean, there's quite a few ways. There's in-person visits, of course, which are delightful and encouraged. That's number one. There's WhatsApp, Zoom calls. We've got lots of platforms nowadays. Since COVID, this has just kind of expanded massively. We have synchronized pregnancy applications that we use to keep surrogate carriers and parents and their respective coordinators all on track. We've got little scrapbooks. And then, of course, you know, just program information and being very transparent from the beginning, issuing guides for everybody to follow along. So not just phone calls and check-ins, but you've also got tangible things in front of you. So intended parents can track what's happening. They know what to expect and when as well. Mm-hmm. Did you have anything to add?
And adding on to that, you mentioned how do we make sure that they're not under the eye at all times, being watched and told how to live their life.
Which is where the boundaries come in, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, from what I can say, I'm not a coordinator, but I work with our coordinators. And the parents are always sort of very well informed by coordinators at the beginning about respecting the carrier's life. So through finding out what the carrier would like out of this relationship, and then sort of passing that along to the parents and asking the parents to respect that, you end up with lots of different dynamics. You might have one family arrangement where everyone loves to chat, And you might have another where language is an issue, or she's a bit of an introvert. You know, she doesn't really want to talk that much. She loves what she's doing, but her character isn't this chatty. So like Stephanie mentioned at the beginning, when you go through all of the matching and the screening, this information is also put together.
Yeah, and this is, you know, one of the most important pieces is just mindful matching. And this takes place through interviews with intended parents at the very beginning, what their expectations are, what their schedules are like, what type of contact they're looking for after birth. That's an important part. Are you looking to forge a relationship that's going to extend long-term, or are you looking to kind of celebrate the moment with the person helping you and have a lovely memory, but maybe after birth, not being in each other's pockets? So it's just important for mindful matching that we get those points clear from the start. It's human nature that could always evolve and change, but we like to start with as much information as possible. And as I mentioned before, mediated communication only throughout the journey. What either party chooses to do after a baby's born is up to them, but to keep boundaries respected for our gestational carriers, it's just so important that all communication is done through coordinators. There can be group calls, there can be group visits, but there's always a member, a support member for either intended parents or the surrogate carrier present during those times. So that just keeps everything on track nicely. And then also, you know, there's conversations about social media privacy. It's not just our gestational carriers that are involved, but also their families. So it's just important to make sure that everybody respects the boundaries on that from the beginning, and they really do. We haven't had many instances where anybody violates or steps over the line in that regard. And then mostly in terms of boundaries, it would be, I think, you know, one point that sometimes can be a bit challenging for intended parents, but then once you explain it, it's really well understood and taken on board completely. And that would just be the birth plan for the surrogate carrier, her personal birth plan, and the mode of delivery that she chooses. So that really is something unilaterally that we leave to her and that we like to have respected. But that's communicated from the very beginning, so there's no surprises for intended parents.
And we make sure she has a doula with her as well, a person who's experienced in labor and delivery, that speaks her language, very, very important, and they're with her the whole time during labor. Or cesarean section, if the baby's to be born in this way.
Yeah, and delivery is private as well. It's another important point with intended parents. That's one aspect of the journey that really is to be private. There's a lot of time, even though it's a momentous moment for intended parents, there's a lot of time afterwards for intended parents to be involved and to celebrate the arrival of their little one.
Good, that's really good to hear. And, you know, there are stories out there of surrogacy journeys going wrong where people haven't used an agency and they've had a private agreement, and you know, they haven't had the guidance that an agency such as Be Parent can offer throughout. So for someone who's considering surrogacy, how would you sort of summarize the care that comes with that guidance and with that structure and with having those boundaries and setting everything out with an agreement so that there is no room for kind of miscommunication or, you know, boundaries not being as they should be, or all of the things that you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, there's different sort of points for intended parents versus gestational carriers in terms of how to keep things smooth. I think mainly for intended parents, it would be the understanding that surrogacy, there's no magic to it other than the fact that there is a sense of incredulous technology and synchronicity happening, but all the same realistic challenges and pitfalls and risks can occur in a surrogacy as could occur in any routine pregnancy. So it's just important for parents to understand that, and with that, it's tied in health insurance, considering these things. I think intended parents taking on a private journey sometimes, number one, they don't have the experience. Not many people have been through this. So they're sort of starting from the beginning, maybe not aware of just how many considerations there are. So health and safety insurance would be number one. Obviously, being right from the beginning, having really tough conversations. Intended parents need to clarify what will they do in the event of a termination, multiple birth, prematurity. Do they want genetic screening? legal considerations. There's just so many different facets. So it's not something that an intended parent might immediately think of, not having that experience. So really exploring all the tough conversations from the beginning helps keep things smooth. Being flexible, trying to adopt a personality style during a journey where, you can just be flexible with what happens. Private journeys certainly would encounter many ups and downs. An agency will help smooth that because there's the experience there and there's the support. There's many key players that have the knowledge and have been through, all the ups and downs, the roller coaster of what can happen and how to, creatively find solutions and quickly to keep a journey as smooth as possible. Just being, I think, being able to provide that buffer in terms of the dynamic between surrogate carriers and intended parents. It's very normal that intended parents could want to cross the line and step over. It's human nature, especially if you haven't been pregnant before and you're relinquishing an enormous amount of control. So I think just being skilled in managing that is very important, and that's something that an intended parent would miss out on or might not have the skills to do if they were arranging privately for their surrogacy.
I love that. One of the other key points that you mentioned, because you've just written a fantastic article for us, which is all about this as well. And for people who are looking into surrogacy or considering being a surrogate, please do head to our link in bio to find out more and to contact the team at Be Parent, who would love to hear from you and talk to you about a bespoke plan and take things further. But organisation, key to all of this. How do you support gestational carers staying on top and being on track with what they need to be doing, and likewise with the intended parents for that smooth process?
I think mainly for gestational carriers, it's important that there's research done ahead of time with the agency, that they reach out, that they speak to other other gestational carriers prior, who've done prior journeys. Just ask, how supportive was the agency? How supportive were the intended parents? What was the experience like? So getting a bit of that feedback. And health coverage, I'm going to say it again, how important it is for a surrogate carrier to have health coverage. So investigate, everything that the agency is offering and exactly how much coverage, not just for physical health, but also for mental health. What access is there to counseling and this kind of thing. I would suggest just on that line that surrogate carriers really take advantage of that option. It's always offered and it's out there, but many, will shy away from it or feel they don't need it. So I would recommend take advantage of each and every opportunity for counseling. A lot of support is needed for any pregnancy, especially in a surrogacy. Mm-hmm. To plan ahead as a surrogate carrier as to, what will you do down the line when people who don't know about your surrogacy ask why you're pregnant or, your body's changing. So figure that out ahead of time. Who are you bringing in? Who are you telling? People that you're not telling, how are you going to explain it so that you have sort of a comfortable framework ahead of time? To definitely clearly communicate all expectations from the beginning. And this is in regards to communication with intended parents, how your thoughts on multiple birth, delivery mode, travel, any expectations after birth for relationship, this kind of thing. So just to be very vocal and upfront from the beginning and voice exactly how, what your comfort level is on all of those points. Thinking of a birth plan and communicating a birth plan in advance so intended parents can be aware and that, an agency can be aware to properly support carriers in that way.
Our carriers receive antenatal education.
Amazing.
So, yeah, they have, like we mentioned, they have their own assigned nurses to them. So like our parents have their coordinators, our carriers have their nurses.
So that was what I was going to ask you. From pregnancy through to birth, you've mentioned birth slightly here in terms of the support offered, but these magical touches going into that fourth trimester, as some people refer to it as, how else are gestational carers supported through Be Parent?
Sure. So, I mean, there's all the logistical support. So, you know, during a pregnancy, as the pregnancy is evolving and getting close to birth, and then after birth, just logistical support. So, transportation, grocery shopping, self-care, family care, these types of things, general errands. So, assistance just with daily life as a surrogate carrier is sort of, you know, regrouping after birth during the postpartum period. Obviously, as I've mentioned, unlimited access to counseling and any mental health support needed during it's a transitional period. It's, you know, for surrogate carriers as well, it's not just about the physical aspect, but they've been part of something, you know, truly amazing. And once that comes to completion, there can be a feeling of a bit of a void, you know, so it's just helping that transition along in that way. Obviously in-home care for rehabilitation, so that includes any medication administration, anything required can be in her home, in her residence after birth, or accompaniment to each and every follow-up appointment as she's recovering postpartum. Also, you know, guidance in regards to keeping and building on a relationship with intended parents, if that's important to her, something that was defined ahead of time, also important to the intended parents, then that's something that we can facilitate and help with as well. Is there anything else?
I think you hit it perfectly when you said that there's a phase where they were, you know, in my career so far, I've worked with a lot of pregnant ladies from the regular dynamic family setup. And I think a pregnant lady who's having her own biological child and a pregnant lady who's carrying a child for family in waiting, they both go through what you mentioned. Yeah. The baby comes out and all of a sudden they're not a priority anymore. They're not checked in all the time anymore. You know, it definitely is challenging for them. They're physically and emotionally going through a very big transition. They're healing and recovering from major abdominal surgery or vaginal childbirth, which usually still has its recovery time frame associated to it. And yeah, it's just so important that they have access to someone to speak to about it. And I think that we can see that we're doing a good job of that because our carriers come back, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah, they know we take care of them.
Yeah. So for anyone who is interested in going down the surrogacy route or being a surrogate, anything that you'd like to add to finish with, as well as people going to our link in bio, reading more about all of the things that we talked about today in more detail, as well as going to your website and contacting your team to find out more about next steps. Anything you'd like to end with?
I think just, you know, the research phase is just so important in being informed. So you can only do that by going out and speaking to people, going online, being part of groups, whether it's online or in your community, and just find out what people are saying and what the feedback's like. It's super important to get that firsthand feedback, and to also just understand that, you know, this is a process that is it's not overnight. It can move very, very quickly, but it can also be an extended period of time. So, you know, whether it's the surrogate carrier, intended parents, or your team at an agency, they can be in your life for over a year. So just to take that into account and to really sort of tread carefully, step by step, and to do your research.
Great tips. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you as always. I love Be Parents' holistic approach and the way that you look out for the surrogates, but also the intended parents, of course. And yeah, all of this information, as I mentioned, is in this fabulous article that you've written for us, which is on our website. So do read more. As you said, ask the right questions and head to our link in bio to find out more. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Eloise. It was a pleasure.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.